Hello, viewers. I hope you are having an awesome Christmas time. Just so it's not distracting to you, my shirt says, "You done messed up." And it's got a picture, and it says, "AA Ron." Most of you who are my students will remember that. This is my Christmas tree. And that is the new cat tree. So background should not distract you anymore. Anyway, this is my first video after I did something stupid, which was tell you, if you can't deal with the problem, just ignore it or move on. Because then I was forced to deal with the problem that I couldn't ignore or move away from. Which was, I had hurt my foot really bad, and I got trapped in a tiny little town called Morarp. And I had to stand on that damaged foot for 3 hours, and I couldn't get away, and I couldn't move on, I couldn't just deal with it. So I was karmically repaid. Anyway, today I'm going to talk to you about the value of words and deciding that they mean the same thing to you and other people. The problem is, and this starts with a complete angry Gen X rant real quick about memes. So, OK Boomer is very popular right now. And OK Boomer is the modern times version of telling old people to screw off. Which, perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. Old people ruined your lives and made them significantly worse and harder and took all the good everythings. But the word boomer means something. And technically, in America, the baby boom, which is where boomer comes from, was directly after World War II. So, from the years of 1946 to 1962 are generally considered the boomer years. What people born in that time period had tremendous economic advantages and very little economic disadvantage. Even if they were poor, it was very easy to climb out of it then, because we had a great deal of industry going on everywhere. In America especially, but elsewhere, because they were rebuilding for World War II, it was very easy to, if you worked hard, to succeed at something. And so boomer, to me and almost anybody my age, means our parents. The problem is that boomer is used now as anybody who is older than you and thinks something different than you do. So, OK Boomer has become the, you're old and I'm not going to listen to you. Now, to Gen Xers like myself, boomer is especially frustrating because we come from a time when words meant a specific thing. And yes, even me saying words mean a specific thing, don't change them, is a pretty boomer idea. But while yes, words do change over time and their meaning changes over time, that's how descriptive language works. To have a fruitful conversation with anyone, you have to have words mean the same thing. If I say mobile and you hear telephone and I mean laptop, then me talking about having trouble with my mobile's memory, you're not going to understand exactly what I'm saying because I'm talking about something different than you are. Similarly, if we call something fasty, and fasty to you means that somebody's promiscuous and that they have lots of unprotected sex, and I'm talking about fast food, then me saying grabbing a fasty is going to mean a whole different thing than you saying grabbing a fasty. So to have legitimate discussion and conversation, words have to mean the same thing. So yes, words change over time, different people have different meanings, but we also have to agree that words do mean something. And to just be able to change their meaning purely on a whim or because of a meme or whatever is kind of irresponsible. Part of the problem is that in modern times, the bad guys have learned to use the weapons of the good guys. It used to be that counterculture had the specific purpose of bringing down the establishment or the man. So rich people were, having to deal with subversion. Is that cats? Stop it. But rich people the poor people would use memes or sabotage or subterfuge or grassroots movements to bring down the 1%, to disrupt the status quo and the social order. The problem is that the bad people, the people who aren't actually victims, started using victim tactics and started pretending to be the victims. And honestly, people have been pretending to be the victims since we first started getting these stories of Christians being fed to lions, which, again, propaganda. But it's the people who are strong pretending to be the victims has always kind of been a thing. But anymore, it's become more and more and more of a thing. And that, with gaslighting, which is when you are making someone else look crazy by doing little things and then pretending that you're not doing anything. And dog whistling, which is where you use code language that you can then say doesn't mean what it means, but everybody who's in your particular group knows what it means. Dog whistling was used heavily in the late 80s, early 90s so that you could talk to your base without other people being able to accuse you of things. Like, for example, in America, you would dog whistle if you said urban youth, but you actually meant young, brown, or black people. So anytime a politician would say, we're having trouble with urban youth going wild, what they actually meant is the black people and brown people aren't doing what we tell them to do. The problem is that the alt-right has picked up all these things. Populists in general, not always alt-right, but mostly alt-right. There are some alt-left people and some anarchists and some, honestly, anarcho-communists and anarcho-capitalists who have picked up these tactics and have used them basically to undermine pretty much freedom. The problem is that when we can't agree on what words mean, there's really no discussion possible, and you can't actually have valid, important conversations. I had a student last year who who disagreed with me on almost everything. Well, that's not true. At his base, we agreed on almost everything, but we completely disagreed on the way that things should be and the way that you should act. And that student and I were able to have respectful, decent conversations because we had the same language. We were able to speak in English and have the same meaning and be able to describe things and have a meaningful dialogue. Neither of us particularly changed our beliefs, but we understood the other person better because we were able to have a conversation with words meaning the same thing. And, he shared video evidence. I shared video evidence. We had conversations. I think both of us improved from it. But if we hadn't been able to agree on what terms meant, we would not have been able to have that discussion. So my primary complaint with OK Boomer is not that boomers should not be shunned, because boomers caused most of the problems in the modern world. Most of the things that are wrong are either because of inaction or active meddling by people from that generation. And don't get me wrong, there's some of them that are technically blameless, but they let it happen, either through their own interaction or through their own ignorance. And ignorance was a choice. Sorry, you can't ignore horrible people for that long and just get away scot-free. I'm sorry. No, boomers are responsible for the shit. But you can't call anyone older than you a boomer. Especially when you have a teenager calling a 20-something a boomer. That's just ridiculous. And it's frustrating. The problem is that double-edged weapons like words just aren't, people don't use things right. And just like back in the old days when you had to actually fight to kill people or actually had to make effort to kill people, you can get wounded on your own weapon. You can get wounded on your own sword, or in modern terminology, you can shoot yourself in the foot. It's one of those things where when you don't practice at something, chances are you're going to hurt yourself with it. Now, the problem is that stupid people don't know when they've destroyed their own argument. So they can have long conversations and never realize that they have completely argued themselves out of sense. So in that way, stupidity is a nice protective shield. But that's a whole different conversation. Anyway, what I am telling you, basically this is the okay boomer conversation, or the value of having words. So the problem is that if you genuinely want to understand other people, if you genuinely want to understand your enemies and be able to argue with them, then you need to agree on what certain important, valid terms mean. It's another problem with this is feminism. A lot of people think feminism means something different than what it does. And people don't necessarily agree on what it means. For example, I, as a feminist, believe that women should be equal to men. I believe they should have all the same opportunities. I believe they should have all the same chances to succeed. And I believe that we should make up for some of the chances that they missed. But equal does not mean the same. Women are not exactly the same as men. And trans people, that's a whole different thing. But treating women exactly the same as men is not treating people equal to men. That's my beliefs on feminism. But there are some people who believe that feminism means complete subjugation of men. Men should be sterilized or killed or whatever. And then there's some people that believe that feminism means that you should just go out and sleep with whoever you want because being a slut is empowering. And even the word slut is, And I use that word gender-free, but man, does that sound incredibly sexist. So, withdraw that. I'm not going to fix the video. But what I mean is that there are some people who find sexual promiscuity to be empowering and good. And for those people, cool. But for me, that's not part of my definition. My definition is same abilities, same opportunities. And yes, that does mean being able to sleep with as many people as you want. But promiscuity and chosen activity are different. This is a deep rabbit hole. I don't have time on this video. This video has gone far too long as it is. I'll have another video about that particular aspect at a later date. For right now, words, they have to mean something. If you can't agree with the other person on what the basic words of an argument are, you can't really argue with them. You're just both shouting into the void without other people understanding it. That's it. So, value of words. Please forgive me for the last minute or so of this. Hope you're all well. Beep boop.